You reach into the mailbox and you already know. The hydro bill. Heavier than last month. Your stomach drops a little, right there on the porch. You're not alone. Right now, across this country, more households than ever are falling behind on the bills that used to be simple. And here's the part nobody says out loud. It isn't because people got careless or lazy. It's because we forgot something our grandparents knew in their bones. Near the end of this, I'll hand you a trick settlers used in the 1880s, written down in old government farm bulletins, and then quietly buried, that cut their heating costs almost in half. You can do it this weekend, in the house you already live in, whether you own it or rent it. But let me start with where I saw the proof with my own eyes, because for most of my life I would have laughed at what I'm about to tell you. It was a cold February morning outside Yorkton, Saskatchewan. I was standing in my old neighbor Walter's yard, holding a coffee that was going cold fast, staring at bales of straw stacked all the way around the bottom of his house. It looked like he was hiding something under there. I thought the old man had finally lost it. I actually said so, half joking. Walter just smiled and told me to come back and say that after I'd seen my own heating bill in March. I did come back. And I stopped laughing. Because that winter, Walter's house cost him a fraction of what mine did to keep warm. Same weather. Same brutal prairie wind. His place was older than mine and smaller, and it still beat me by a country mile. That was the morning I realized I'd been doing everything the expensive way for almost 30 years, and nobody had ever told me there was another way. Somebody, somewhere, had made sure of that. So let me take you back to the beginning of what I learned, because it starts with one simple mistake almost every one of us makes without thinking. Here's the mistake. We heat the whole house. All of it. Every room, all day, even the ones nobody walks into. We treat the furnace like it's supposed to warm the air in empty bedrooms and hallways, and that spare room where the exercise bike goes to die. And we pay for every single cubic foot of that heated air, whether a human body ever enters the room or not. Now, that sounds normal to you, because it's all any of us have ever known, but it is brand new in the history of this country. For most of Canadian history, nobody on earth heated an entire house evenly. They would have thought you were mad. They would have thought you were rich and foolish, which back then was the same thing. Go back to the farmhouses of the 1800s. There was one room that mattered in winter, the kitchen, with the wood cook stove. That stove did everything. It cooked the meals, it heated the water, it warmed the bricks that went into the beds at night, and it kept the one room where the whole family gathered warm enough to live in, the bedrooms upstairs, cold, on purpose. You slept under heavy quilts and a feather tick, and you kept a warm stone at your feet, and you were fine. The idea was simple, and it was genius. You heat the people, not the building. Somewhere along the way we flipped that on its head. We started heating the building and hoping some of it reached the people. And the cost of that flip is sitting in your mailbox right now. Here's what the old-timers understood that we don't. Air is a terrible thing to heat. It holds almost no warmth. It leaks out through every crack. And the second your furnace shuts off, it starts giving that heat right back to the cold outside. Heating a big volume of empty air is like trying to fill a bathtub with the drain wide open. You can do it. You just have to keep pouring money down the hole forever. So the first thing I did, after that morning in Walter's yard, was start heating zones instead of the whole house. I picked the rooms we actually lived in during the day, and I closed off the ones we didn't. Not sealed forever, just closed. A heavy curtain across a hallway, a door kept shut. And I stopped apologizing to the empty guest room for letting it get cold. My bill dropped that first month. Not by a little, enough that I sat down at the kitchen table and read it twice. But zoning the heat was only the start, and honestly it was the easy part, because I still had a much bigger problem. And it's the same problem hiding in your walls right now, whether you can feel it or not. The heat I was paying for was escaping, fast, and I had no idea where. Let me ask you something. On a windy winter day, have you ever walked past a window in your house and felt that cold river of air pouring off it, even though the window was shut tight? That's not your imagination. That's money. That's the heat you paid for, leaving the building, and cold air from outside coming in to take its place. Here's a number that stopped me cold when I first heard it. In a typical older Canadian home, somewhere between a quarter and a third of all your heat loss goes out through the windows and the gaps around them. A quarter to a third. Think about what that means. For every $3 you hand the hydro or gas company this winter, close to one of them is going straight out the glass and into the snow. Now, the modern answer to this is always the same, isn't it? Spend money. Rip out your windows. Put in triple pane, $10, $15, $20,000, and a nice salesman shaking your hand. And look, new windows are fine if you've got the money falling out of your pockets. Most of us don't. And here's the thing that nobody selling you those windows will ever admit. Our grandparents solved this exact problem for almost nothing, and their solution worked just as well. They used something called a storm window. But not the aluminum kind you're picturing. The old way was a second wooden window that went up on the outside every autumn, creating a pocket of still, trapped air between the two panes. And that trapped layer of dead air is the whole secret. Still, air doesn't move heat. It just sits there like a blanket. That little gap of nothing between two sheets of glass does most of the work that a $2,000 window does today. In the old farmhouses, putting up the storm windows was a ritual. It happened in October, same time as bringing in the last of the root vegetables, and taking them down in spring was the sign that winter had finally let go. There are diaries from Ontario and the Maritimes that mark the exact day the storms went up, year after year, the way we mark birthdays. But here's where it gets interesting for you and me, the folks who don't have a pile of old wooden storm windows in the shed, because you can make that same pocket of dead, still air on the inside of your window today for a few dollars, and it works nearly as well. You've probably even seen the kit and not known what it was for. It's the clear plastic film that goes over the inside of your window frame, the kind you shrink tight with a hairdryer. Most people think it's a cheap gimmick. It is not. It is a modern copy of a 200-year-old idea. It creates that trapped air pocket the old storm window made, and studies out of Canadian energy programs have found it can cut the heat loss from a single pane window by around 40 to 50%, 40 to 50% from a product that costs less than a decent lunch. I did every window in the cold side of my house one Saturday afternoon. Cost me about $30 for the whole place, and the next power bill told the story better than I ever could. So now I was heating only the rooms I lived in, and I'd stop the heat from pouring out the windows, and that felt good. It felt like I was finally winning something. But then a harder question started nagging at me, and I couldn't let it go. If this stuff is so simple, and so cheap, and it works this well, then why did nobody ever tell me? Why did I go almost 30 years, freezing and paying, when the answer cost $30 and an afternoon? That's when I started to understand who benefits from you forgetting. Think about it for a minute. There is an entire industry built on the idea that the only way to lower your bills is to spend a large amount of money first. New furnace, new windows, new smart thermostat that phones home to a company you'll never meet. Every one of those is a product. Every one of them has a salesman, a manufacturer, a financing plan, and every one of them makes money the moment you decide that comfort is something you buy instead of something you build. The old methods had no salesman. Nobody gets rich when you hang a heavy curtain across your hallway or stack straw against your foundation. There's no company with a marketing budget reminding you that your grandmother's tricks still work. So those tricks slipped out of the conversation. Not because they failed, because there was no profit in keeping them alive. And the utility itself? Let's be honest about how they make their living. They make it by the unit. Every cubic foot of gas, every kilowatt hour of power. A house that leaks heat all winter is not a problem for them. It's their best customer. The furnace that runs and runs, warming empty rooms, sending a third of its heat out the windows, that is exactly the customer a metered business is built around. Nobody was ever going to knock on your door and teach you to need them less. But somebody did keep the old ways alive. Quietly. In small towns and on farms and in the memories of people like Walter, who never trusted a salesman a day in his life. And that brings me to the part of this that I most want you to hear, because it's for the people who feel like all of this is meant for somebody else. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, that's fine for a man with a farmhouse and a straw pile, but I rent. Or I live in an old brick place I can't touch. Or my landlord would have a fit if I started nailing things to the wall. I need you to hear me on this. What I'm about to show you was made for exactly your situation. No contractor, no permit. No permanent change to anything. You could do it in an apartment and take it all with you when you move, because the biggest, cheapest win in the whole house isn't the windows and it isn't the furnace. It's the air you can't see moving. The drafts. The cold that sneaks in low, along the floor, under doors, through outlets on outside walls, around the frames, up through the gap where the wall meets the floor. Cold air is heavy. It pools down low and it flows like water. And all winter long it's crawling across your floors while the warm air you paid for rises up and escapes out the top of the house. Your house breathes, whether you want it to or not, and every breath costs you. Here's the old country fix, and it costs almost nothing. The draft stopper. Our grandmothers called it a draft snake. It's a long tube of fabric, weighted with sand or dry rice or even dried beans, that you lay along the bottom of a door or across a drafty windowsill. Sounds too simple to matter, doesn't it? Huh, I thought so too. But that one gap under an exterior door can leak as much cold air as a hole the size of a brick punched straight through your wall. Blocking it is one of the highest value things you will ever do for your comfort, and you can make one from an old pant leg in 20 minutes. And that brings me to something I want to share with you before we go any further, because what I just described is only the beginning. I spent years pulling together every buried method, every forgotten technique, every trick from old farm bulletins and settler diaries, and the quiet knowledge of people like Walter, and I put all of it into a book. It's called Canadian Edge, and it's also available as Deep Canadian and Canadian Complete, depending on how deep you want to go. Everything in this video, and a great deal more that I couldn't fit here, is laid out step by step, in plain language, for the house you already live in, whether you own or rent. You'll find the details in the description below. But let's get back to the deeper problem, the one hiding right inside your walls. Then go find the outlets and light switches on your outside walls. Put your hand near them on a cold day. Feel that? Cold air, coming straight through the wall cavity into your room. You can buy foam gaskets that go behind the cover plate for pennies apiece. No tools but a screwdriver, and they stop that leak dead. Renters, this is completely reversible. Take them out when you leave. Nobody will ever know but you and your bill. And here's one more that the old-timers swore by, especially the ones from the old country. Heavy fabric over the windows at night. Not the thin decorative curtains we hang for looks. Thick, lined drapes, or even a wool blanket on a rod, pulled shut the moment the sun goes down. That heavy layer traps a cushion of still air against the glass, the same principle as the storm window, and it can noticeably slow the heat bleeding out of your rooms overnight, which is exactly when it's coldest and when you're paying to sleep. Open them in the morning to let the low winter sun pour in and warm the room for free. That's it. That's the whole trick. Close them at dusk, open them at dawn, and let the sun do a shift of work it's been doing for nothing since the beginning of time. None of that needs a landlord's permission. None of it needs a loan. And all of it, together, adds up to real money kept in your pocket instead of poured down the drain. So by now I'd stacked up win after win. Zoned heating, window film, draft snakes, outlet gaskets, heavy curtains at dusk, and each one shaved a little more off the bill. I was feeling pretty proud of myself, truth be told. I thought I'd cracked it. Then Walter, the man with the straw, sat me down and told me I was still missing the biggest one of all, the one his grandfather brought over from the old country, the one written down in the earliest farm records of this country and then forgotten so completely that most Canadians today have never even heard the word for it. Therefore, before I give it to you, I have to explain why it works, because when I first heard it, I flat out didn't believe him. Here's the thing about your house that nobody thinks about. A huge amount of your heat doesn't escape out the top or the sides, it escapes out the bottom. Down through the floor, down into the foundation, and out into the frozen ground, and the wind that scours along the base of your walls. That band, right where your house meets the earth, the foundation and the floor above it, is one of the leakiest, coldest parts of the entire building. It's the part you never see and never think to protect. And the settlers who built this country knew that better than anyone, because if they got it wrong, they didn't just pay a bill, they froze. So let me take you all the way back. After the Dominion Lands Act of 1872, the government opened up the prairies and told people they could have 160 acres for almost nothing if they could survive on it for 3 years. Survive being the key word. These families arrived on the open plains of what would become Saskatchewan and Manitoba with almost nothing, facing winters that would kill you if you made a single serious mistake. They had no insulation as we know it, no furnaces, no hydro, and yet they made it through winters far colder than anything most of us have ever felt. How? One of the ways was a technique the old records simply called banking the house. Here's what they did. In the late autumn, before the ground froze hard, they piled material up against the entire base of the house, all the way around, a couple of feet high and a couple of feet deep. On the prairies, they used earth, straw, manure, flax straw, whatever they had. In wooded areas, they used leaves and evergreen boughs packed tight. Later, once winter set in hard, they let the snow itself bank up against that wall, and they helped it along, shoveling it up against the base rather than clearing it away. And that packed ring of material around the bottom of the house did something remarkable. It stopped the wind from stealing heat out of the foundation, and it wrapped the coldest, leakiest part of the building in a thick blanket that held the warmth in. Now here's the part that made me sit up. The numbers behind it are real, and they're stronger than you'd ever guess. Dry straw has an insulating value of roughly 1.5 per inch of thickness. Pile 2 feet of it against your foundation, and you've wrapped that wall in something close to the insulating power of a modern insulated wall for the price of nothing. And snow, the very thing we curse all winter, is one of the best free insulators on earth. Loosely packed snow carries an insulating value of about 1 per inch. 2 or 3 feet of snow banked against your wall is a thick, silent blanket that the settlers understood, and we shovel away without a second thought. There it is. The Inuit knew it when they built with snow. The prairie homesteaders knew it when they banked their little houses against the wind. And it was written down, plain as day, in the earliest agricultural bulletins that the Department of Agriculture and the prairie colleges sent out to teach new settlers how to survive their first winter. Banking the house was standard advice. It was in the manuals. It was as ordinary as splitting kindling. And then it vanished. Because once the furnace and the pipeline and the hydro line reached every home, there was no profit in a man being taught to shovel snow against his own wall for free. The knowledge didn't fail. It was simply allowed to die, because a family that needs less heat is a family that pays for less heat, and that has never been good for business. So here is exactly how you do it this weekend. And I've done it myself, so I'm not guessing. If you own your place and you've got a garden or a yard, get yourself some straw bales in the autumn before the deep freeze. A bale runs you just a few dollars from any farm or feed store. Line them up snug against the foundation, all the way around the base of the house, pressed tight to the wall, especially on the side that catches the wind. Tuck them right up against that band where the house meets the ground. That's it. In spring, you pull them away, and the straw goes straight into your garden as mulch, so it does a second job before it's done. Nothing wasted. If you don't have straw, do what your grandparents did with the free stuff that falls from the sky. When it snows, don't clear the snow away from the base of your house on the sheltered sides. Bank it up against the wall instead. Shovel it up into a thick, packed ridge against the foundation, and let it sit there all winter as the blanket it was always meant to be. You've been throwing away one of the best insulators in the world with your own 2 hands, every single storm, your whole life. And for the renters and the apartment folks who've stuck with me this far, here's your version, because the principle is exactly the same, even if you can't touch the outside of the building. The cold comes in low and it pools on the floor. So you fight it on the inside, down low, right where it lives. Rugs and heavy mats on any bare floor over an unheated space below. Draft snakes along the base of every exterior door. A heavy curtain that reaches all the way to the floor, not stopping short at the sill, so the cold can't spill out from behind it and run across your room. You are banking the inside of your living space the same way Walter's grandfather banked the outside of his. Same idea, same free warmth, trapping the heat down where you actually live instead of paying to send it up and out. I banked my own house that first autumn after Walter shamed me into it. Straw on the windy side, snow everywhere else all winter long. And when the coldest stretch of that year hit, 40 below with the wind, my furnace ran less than it ever had, and the floors weren't cold under my feet for the first time in years. I stood in my kitchen, warm, and I thought about all the winters I'd spent paying through the nose, while the answer sat out in every farmer's field, cheap as dirt, older than the country itself. That's the thing that stays with me. This was never lost because it stopped working. It was lost because it worked too well for anyone to make money off it. The families who crossed an ocean and broke this land taught it to their children as plain common sense. Somewhere in the last 2 or 3 generations, we let the salesmen and the utility companies convince us that warmth is something you buy on a monthly plan, and we handed over the simple, free knowledge that kept our people alive for 200 winters. So when you hear that households across Canada have stopped being able to pay their bills, understand what's really happening. It isn't the end of anything. It's a bill coming due for how much we forgot. And what comes next, for the people who are paying attention, is the quiet return of everything we were never supposed to lose. Heating the person, and not the empty room. Trapping the sun's warmth behind a heavy curtain. Wrapping the foundation in straw and snow the way the homesteaders did. Needing them a little less every single winter. You just recovered something that was taken from you, one cheap trick at a time, and the best part is nobody can send you a bill for it. Because here's who you are, if you've made it this far with me. You're the kind of person who always suspected the expensive way wasn't the only way. You felt it in your gut every time a salesman told you the fix would cost thousands. You're the kind of Canadian who trusts an old farmer's straw pile over a glossy brochure, and you were right to. That instinct, the one that made you skeptical, is the same instinct our grandparents survived on. It never left you. It was just waiting for somebody to tell you the truth. Now I want to hear from you, and I want you to actually do this. Not just think about it. Tell me one thing. Did anyone in your family bank the house with snow or straw? Or put up the wooden storm windows every October, or warm the bed with a hot stone or a brick from the stove? I want to know what your people did to get through the winter, because those memories are the real archive, and half of what I know I learned from comments just like the one you're about to leave. Type it out and post it below. Even one line. Somebody reading it needs to hear it. And if you want more of what's been buried, come along with me. Subscribe, not to support some channel, but to stand with the people who are quietly taking this knowledge back, one forgotten trick at a time. Because next time I'm going to show you how our grandparents kept a winter's worth of vegetables fresh, with no fridge, no freezer, and no hydro bill at all, using nothing but a hole in the ground and a secret about temperature that most Canadians have never heard. It kept whole families fed through 5 months of snow, and it still works today in the house you already own. Don't miss it. I'll see you there. I'm so glad you stayed to the end. This video gave you the overview, but inside the Northern Ways circle, I take you through the settler's own heating method, room by room, picking up right where I left off. In there, you can ask me your own question, and a real person answers. Not a machine. You'd belong among practical folks just like you. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen, and you can cancel anytime.